When betrayed and hurt, what do you think is the best way to move forward? Forgiveness, confrontation, or seeking justice? The shocking truth and the nightmare named Daniel Mercer. I once thought I was lucky to have met Daniel. A man so perfect, he seemed to have stepped right out of a dream. Intelligent, sophisticated, with a solid career, and most importantly, a man who loved me with everything he showed. For the past 3 years, I had given him my heart and my trust, believing we were building a strong future together. I thought I was about to have a family, a life partner to share every success and challenge. But in reality, it was all an elaborate act. And I, an attorney specializing in real estate fraud, had become the victim of the most sophisticated scam I had ever seen. I still remember that morning. Daniel sat across from me, taking a sip of his coffee, flashing that perfect smile as he did every day. "I think we should move up our wedding plans. Maybe this spring instead of the fall," he said, his tone casual, as if he were discussing dinner plans. I was surprised but saw no reason to doubt him. A man eager to start a life with the woman he loved? Wasn't that wonderful? But now, I know the truth. That proposal didn't come from love. It came from greed. He wanted to speed up the wedding, not because he was excited for our future, but because he wanted to legalize his control over my assets as soon as possible. That evening, while he was out meeting a client, I received a series of bank notifications for transactions I didn't remember making. Small test transactions, a classic method used to verify accounts before making a large transfer. Something felt off. As I started tracing the transactions, my heart grew cold. There were accounts I had never opened, transactions linked to unfamiliar companies, and worst of all, a property transfer document with my name on it, bearing a signature I had never written. I wanted to believe it was a mistake, that someone had stolen my identity, not the man who had been sleeping next to me every night. But then, I drove to the house I had inherited from my grandmother. The house I had restored with my own hands, brick by brick, window by window, and witnessed a scene I would never forget. A couple I had never seen before walked out of the front door, the woman chatting excitedly with a real estate agent. They were selling my house. They were selling something I had spent years preserving. I stood there, gripping my phone tightly, just as a message from Michael, my private investigator, came through. Transfer confirmed. Deed was filed yesterday, verifying the signature now. I could barely breathe. Daniel had done the unthinkable. Not only had he betrayed my love, but he had tried to steal my entire life, everything I had worked so hard to build. I had loved him, trusted him, shared my dreams and future plans with him. But to him, it was all just a game. He didn't love me. He loved the numbers in my bank account, the value of my real estate, the access I had to wealthy clients. I wasn't his life partner. I was just another target, another name on the list of successful women he had scammed before. Rage boiled through my veins. I had once believed that love was about trust, about building a life together. But to him, it was nothing more than a tool for manipulation and theft. I wanted to confront him right then and there, to tear off the perfect mask he had worn for the past 3 years. But I knew I had to stay calm. I didn't just want him to pay. I wanted him to suffer every consequence of his actions. He might have thought I was just another naive woman, an easy victim like the others he had deceived. But he made one fatal mistake. He forgot that I am Eliza Parker, a real estate attorney with years of experience uncovering fraudsters like him. And this time, he would be the one destroyed. The depth of deception. I gripped the steering wheel tightly as I drove back to the city, my mind racing with everything I had just uncovered. Daniel had nearly succeeded in stealing my home. Just a few more days, and the transfer would have been finalized, making the house legally his to sell. But what sent a chill down my spine wasn't just the fraud itself. It was how sophisticated it was. I had never signed a single document, yet my signature was on the property transfer. What did that mean? Daniel had forged my signature. I needed answers. I needed evidence. I needed to know just how far he had gone with this scheme. I pulled out my phone and dialed Michael Chen, the private investigator I trusted most. I need you to check every financial transaction I've made in the past year, I said, my voice dry and cold. Especially any accounts I never opened. Michael didn't ask questions. I'll have a report for you in a few hours. By the time I arrived at my office, an email from Michael was already waiting in my inbox. I opened it and felt my heart plummet into the abyss. A series of mysterious transactions, wire transfers to unfamiliar accounts, large sums of money disappearing, transactions I never made, offshore accounts, shell companies, financial movements carefully concealed. I read each line, my breath growing shallow. This wasn't just a simple scam. This was a meticulously planned operation, executed over a long period of time. I scanned my list of assets and realized it wasn't just my grandmother's house that had been targeted. Daniel had gathered information on every single property I owned. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, but a chilling sensation crawled down my spine. He knew everything. How did he get all this information? Email. I opened my email access log. And that was when I discovered the worst of it. Daniel had been monitoring me for over a year. I saw unknown IP addresses logged into my account, messages I had never opened yet marked as read from another device. He had collected every tiny detail about me. My work, my finances, my clients, even my family. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the data. And then I saw a folder labeled Parker Properties, a detailed compilation of everything I owned. He didn't just want to scam me. He wanted to take everything from me. A wave of fury, mixed with panic, surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. I couldn't confront him, not yet. I needed to know just how deep this deception ran. I called Eleanor Montgomery, the one person who could help me. I need to see you. Now, I said. 30 minutes later, I was sitting in Eleanor's office, gripping the file from Michael with white-knuckled hands. I laid out everything I had uncovered, every single detail, as Eleanor listened with the piercing gaze of a seasoned judge. When I finished, she set the documents down. "This isn't just personal fraud," Eleanor said slowly. "This is an organized scheme, and there may be more people involved." I clenched my fists. I needed answers. Eleanor picked up her phone and made a call. "Michael, I want everything on Daniel Mercer. Dig into his past." I stared at Eleanor as she hung up. "You think he's done this before?" She nodded. "No one pulls off a scam this sophisticated on their first try. You might not be his only victim." The tension in my body coiled tighter as Michael sent another report just an hour later. Daniel had done this before. Not once, but at least twice. I opened the file. Rebecca Chambers, Chicago, a businesswoman who lost everything after dating Daniel for 2 years. Ellen Whitaker, Boston, an architect who went bankrupt after a prolonged legal battle orchestrated by Daniel. Everything clicked into place. Daniel wasn't just a liar. He was a predator. A seasoned manipulator who hunted successful women, deceived them, and stripped them of everything. I took a deep breath, trying to push down the panic clawing at my chest. But I knew I was racing against time. If I didn't act now, I could be his next victim. And this time, he would be the one to lose. The counterattack, destroying him completely. I sat in Eleanor's office, my fingers tightening around the pen on her desk. My breathing was slow but heavy, my mind spinning with everything I had just uncovered. Daniel wasn't just a cheater. He was a professional con artist. He had done this before, stolen from other women, left them in financial ruin with nothing but debts and shattered lives. But this time he chose the wrong target. I wasn't some naive businesswoman or an easily manipulated romantic. I was a lawyer. I knew the law, I knew the system, and I knew exactly how to weaponize it against men like him. I wasn't just going to expose him. I was going to make sure that by the time he faced justice, he would have nothing left except a prison sentence that would follow him for the rest of his life. Eleanor studied me from across the desk, her expression sharp as a blade. "Are you sure?" You want to play the long game? She asked. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay steady. I don't just want to take back what's mine, I said. I want him to pay. The trap, a perfect plan. I knew Daniel was too careful to get his hands dirty. He always had others do the dirty work. A team of corrupt lawyers, shell companies, and a cleaner who erased all traces of his crimes. If I wanted to take him down, I needed undeniable evidence. Eleanor called in Michael and a few trusted allies. We need a trap, I said. A plan that forces him to expose himself while in action. Michael nodded. We can use your own property as bait. If Daniel tried to sell your house before, I bet he's still watching your other assets. I pulled out my phone, pretending to have a conversation with an important client. The house in Tahoe? Yes, I'm considering selling it. An international investor just offered above market price. I spoke loudly enough for Daniel, who was undoubtedly monitoring me, to accidentally overhear. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Are you actually thinking of selling it? I shook my head. No, but Daniel will believe I am. The moment he heard this, I knew he'd make a move, trying to steal ownership, just like he did with my grandmother's house. I leaned back, carefully planning every step. Every move had to be flawless. I would continue pretending to be the perfect fiancé, smiling, loving, completely unsuspecting. Michael would install trackers and monitor all of Daniel's financial transactions, blocking any suspicious activity. I would plant recording devices and hidden cameras in our shared apartment, capturing every word, every call he made. We would track his contacts, identifying everyone supporting him in this scheme. And finally, when he believed everything was going exactly as planned, we would spring the trap. The calm before the storm. Keeping up the act, I returned to the apartment, forcing myself to breathe evenly. I had to act normal. I had to be the Eliza from yesterday, the woman who loved him, trusted him, and suspected nothing. Daniel had dinner ready. He poured me a glass of wine, his hand brushing lightly over mine. Before, that touch would have sent a shiver down my spine. But now all I felt was disgust. He raised his glass. We're about to start a new life together, Eliza. I lifted mine, smiling sweetly, masking the rage boiling inside me. I can't wait, I murmured. I saw Daniel glance at his phone as a message popped up. He tried to hide it, but I knew him too well. He was making a move, and that only confirmed one thing. His web was tightening, but this time he was the prey. I would wait, I would watch, and when the time was right, I would pull the rug out from under him. Taking a slow breath, I typed a quick message to Michael under the table. He's getting ready to strike. Initiate the next phase. The perfect end, Daniel. You've lost. I sat inside the Federal Investigation Team's surveillance room, my eyes locked onto the monitors. Daniel had no idea that every move he made was being recorded. He walked confidently into my law office, one hand holding a briefcase, the other scrolling through his phone. I knew exactly who he was texting. Jacob Stein, the cleaner he hired to wipe all traces of his fraudulent transactions. Everything is going according to his plan, I thought, the corner of my lips curling into a cold smirk. But he didn't know. His own plan was about to destroy him. I glanced at my wristwatch, where a small hidden camera was discreetly recording everything, every movement, every word, every crime. Daniel approached my desk, pulled a key from his pocket, and unlocked the safe. My safe. He was completely confident, because he thought he was in control. But he didn't know that the safe's code had been changed 2 days ago, and inside there were no important documents left. Only planted decoy files with GPS trackers embedded in them. All right, he muttered, opening his laptop and logging into my firm's financial system. I turned to Michael, sitting beside me in the observation room. Are we ready? I asked, my voice calm, but laced with excitement. Michael nodded and pressed a button on the control panel. And just like that, Daniel Mercer's nightmare began. The fall of Daniel Mercer. The office doors burst open. 5 federal agents stormed in, their weapons drawn. Daniel Mercer, you are under arrest for financial fraud, forgery, money laundering, and conspiracy with organized crime. Daniel froze, his eyes widening in terror. He stammered, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I don't understand what's happening. Oh, don't you? I barely held back a laugh. The once confident, arrogant Daniel Mercer now looked like a cornered rat. I have the right to an attorney, he shouted, but there was no strength in his voice now. I stepped out from the observation room, arms crossed, looking at him like a stranger. You don't need to call a lawyer, Daniel, I said. I already prepared a full list of charges for you. It's long enough to keep you busy for the next 20 years behind bars. His face went pale. Eliza? What are you doing? I took slow, deliberate steps toward him, savoring the moment he realized he had lost. No, Daniel, I said coolly. You did this to yourself. The agents cuffed him right in front of me. The sight of it was more satisfying than anything I had ever felt. You're going to regret this, Eliza, Daniel roared, struggling against the agents. I tilted my head, smirking. No, Daniel, I whispered. I don't regret anything. The agents dragged him out of the office, their footsteps echoing through the hallway. And finally, I exhaled, my body releasing 3 years of betrayal, 1 year of surveillance, and 3 months of planning. It was over. The final move. A perfect ending. I turned to Eleanor, who was watching the scene unfold with a satisfied smile. What do you think? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. You did well, Eliza. A perfect ending. Michael stepped forward, extending his hand to me. Congratulations. You've officially destroyed the man who thought he could manipulate you. I shook his hand, feeling a sense of relief I hadn't experienced in a long time. Daniel hadn't just lost me, he had lost his freedom, his reputation, and every bit of wealth he had stolen. After all the formalities were completed, I returned to my grandmother's house, the home Daniel had tried to steal. I stood in the living room, looking up at my grandmother's portrait, which had been restored to its rightful place. She had left this legacy to me, and I had fought to protect it. I lifted my glass of wine, running my fingers along the rim, and smiled. In the end, justice has prevailed. Justice served. The fall of Daniel Mercer. I did not crumble under the weight of Daniel's betrayal. I turned it into the force that destroyed him. Instead of reacting emotionally, I observed, gathered evidence, and constructed the perfect trap. I used his arrogance against him, luring him into a plan of my own without him ever realizing it. Using my legal expertise, I blocked every fraudulent transaction, forcing him to expose his crimes. By the time he realized he had lost, it was already too late. I didn't just seek justice, I turned it into a lesson he would never forget. Now, I sat in the federal court's observation room, watching Daniel on the large monitor. The expensive suits he once flaunted were gone, replaced by the bright orange of a prison uniform. He sat there, his eyes dark, his face hollow after months of confinement. From a cunning fraudster, a so-called brilliant investor, he had become nothing more than an ordinary prisoner, waiting for a sentence that would seal his fate. But the most satisfying part wasn't that Daniel had lost everything. It was how the very system he had once exploited had now turned against him. His case file was hundreds of pages thick, documenting every crime he had committed in the shadows. Financial fraud. He used my identity and that of other victims to orchestrate illegal transactions. Forgery. He forged signatures, contracts, and legal documents to seize assets. Money laundering. He funneled millions through offshore accounts, working with underground networks to cover his tracks. Conspiracy with organized crime. His connection to Kazarian had turned him from a con artist into a cog in an international crime syndicate. He had always counted on an escape route, just as he had before. But this time, the door had slammed shut. When the judge delivered the verdict, 25 years with no parole, full asset seizure, and a permanent ban from working in finance, I felt a satisfaction beyond words. Daniel hadn't just lost his money, he had lost his name, his freedom, and everything he had built through deception. Justice beyond one man, a network in ruins. I walked out of the courthouse, stepping into the midday sun, inhaling deeply. Daniel's downfall didn't end with him. Kazarian's organization was dismantled. Their accounts were frozen. Key figures in their money laundering network were arrested. Daniel's accomplices, his lawyers, accountants, and even his cleaner, were prosecuted one by one. Past victims finally got justice, stolen assets were recovered, and financial reparations were made. He thought he could manipulate the law, but the law exposed him. I didn't need to ruin his name. I didn't need revenge fueled by anger. I let justice do its job, and it did it perfectly. Reclaiming what's mine. And myself, I returned to my grandmother's house, the one Daniel had tried to steal. Now it stood untouched, untainted by his greed. I had reclaimed everything, not just my home, not just my assets, but my own freedom. Daniel and his network had paid the price. He thought he could exploit my love, my intelligence, my success for his own gain. But in the end, he was the one left with nothing. As I looked back on everything, I realized something. Justice isn't just about a courtroom verdict. It's about the truth finally coming to light. Predators like Daniel may hide in the shadows, but the truth will always find them. A lesson he will never forget. I will never forget the moment Daniel was cuffed, his mouth opening and closing with useless pleas. For him, his entire world had collapsed. He could never have imagined that the woman he thought he could control would be the one to destroy him. I didn't need to yell, I didn't need violence. I let justice speak for itself. I used my skills to trap him in the very web of lies he had spun. And in the end, he had no escape. He had always believed he was the smartest one in the room, that he could manipulate the system, control people like chess pieces. But he forgot one crucial rule. The best player isn't the one who sets the trap, it's the one who plays the prey until the moment they turn the game around. The future is mine. I stepped inside my home, looking around one last time. Everything was back where it belonged. The family portraits were restored. The historical documents of the house were back in their rightful place. Everything Daniel had tried to erase, I had rebuilt. But more importantly, I had rebuilt myself. I was no longer the woman who blindly trusted in love, no longer the woman who sacrificed herself for someone unworthy. I was Eliza Parker. Stronger, smarter, and finally, free. No more doubts, no more fears, no more Daniel. I stepped outside, leaving the past behind. A new chapter had begun, one where no one would ever control me again. I lifted my glass, toasting with Eleanor, Michael, and the allies who had stood by me through this battle. Justice always finds those who persist, Eleanor said, a faint smile on her lips. I nodded, my eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning to set. People like Daniel, those who exploit others for personal gain, always get exposed. And he was the perfect example. The takeaway. A story of power, intelligence, and justice. The story of Eliza Parker isn't just about financial fraud. It's about self-reliance, intelligence, and justice. In life, there will always be people who try to take advantage of your trust, whether it's for love, money, or social status. But this story is a reminder. No one can control you unless you allow them to. The key lesson? Always protect yourself. Never hand over full control of your finances, assets, or life, even to those closest to you. Verify. Double-check. Protect what's yours. And most importantly, justice always wins, no matter how long it takes. Manipulators and fraudsters may hide for a while, but eventually the truth will come for them. So let me ask you, would you trust someone completely with your finances and assets? If so, how do you ensure your safety?